Well, thank you guys for joining us today. Excited to talk to you a little bit about branded content. We're going to jump right in, but just know we'll have about 15-20 minutes at the end for questions, so keep that in mind as we chat. I'd love to start kind of general. We'll go starting with you, Danielle, first. I'd love to hear how your careers in filmmaking really led up to working and collaborating with brands. How did you get to this point where you're working with brands on a regular basis?
Well, in the very beginning, I started out as a dancer, and all I wanted to be was like in NSYNC videos, like as a music video dancer. Like I watched Madonna my entire life. So since I had a biochemist mother, she's like, you have to go to school. I had no idea. I was like a senior, basically, and I didn't think I was going to go to college anymore. So I was like, I went to Hunter College to study film because I'm like, that's kind of close to dance.
Yeah.
And then I just went straight into music video from there.
Mm-hmm.
So that the natural transition to like after music videos, like the arc is usually like music videos and then branded content, commercials, and onto the bigger things. So that's just kind of, I just took that trajectory.
Very cool. Not traditional, but very
No.
cool. Folayo?
Sorry, what was the question?
How did your career kind of lead you into partnering with brands? You know, because I know you don't typically start there.
Yeah, no, mine, I took a very scenic route. I started out actually in film production and agencies. I took a stop at Film Independent where I worked as the marketing manager for a couple of years, and then moved to New York, always on the marketing side. When I first started out in production, I always knew that I liked film, I always knew that I liked storytelling, and I wanted to stay in that space. Mm-hmm. For me, I'm somebody that sort of straddles the line between left and right brain, so marketing sort of fit very well into that area. The branded side kind of came in when I left New York. I worked at IFP in New York. I started a marketing consulting company, and from there you're kind of seeing how brands are interested in this storytelling component. Mm-hmm. And it sort of progressed naturally from there. I but I sidestepped over into digital content, mm-hmm. which is where brands were very, very active and very heavy in that space. And the reason that I went into that world is because I didn't know anything about it. I'd spent my whole career essentially in indie film, so that was a transition. But it's funny now, SoulPancake is a division of Participant Media, which is a film company. So to see how things have kind of come full circle, but each of these little pieces from my kind of random journey have kind of coalesced into one thing that like made sense. It's like, oh, this is what I was doing for the last 15 years. Fantastic. But yeah, so I think it just sort of happened, I guess, is the best way to say it.
No, I totally get it. It's interesting how all of your world is now such a gray area. You know, marketers are storytellers and filmmakers are now marketing, and it's wild. And digital agencies are doing creative, and it's really interesting. Max, what about you?
Well, I actually went to film school to be a writer, director, ended up producing in film school, and then, you know, you get out of film school, you have this idea that you're going to be making short films, or you're going to, you know, write a script and someone's going to give you a bunch of money and you're going to go make a feature. And I think the reality is like you get out of school and you got to make money. You got to figure out how do I make a living doing this? So I moved to New York, and I got lucky in that I started working for very little money at a production company that I then became the EP of just a few years later. And, you know, we got to start doing music videos and branded films, and digital as an advertising platform was still sort of new. Like the year that I became an EP there was like the year that Google acquired YouTube. So it was still like early days, wasn't that long ago, in terms of like digital video and brand integration. So it kind of happened very naturally, and as a byproduct, I think, of doing film in New York, advertising is sort of an industry that leads a lot of things there. And we got a crash course in advertising and what it meant to make a deck. You know, like it's like you know, like in film school, they don't teach you like how to make a deck. It's like my entire life was making decks.
Does everybody know what a deck is?
Everybody knows. Yeah, you got to know how to like make it.
It's
like how you sell your idea, you know. And I think like that's a whole part of the filmmaking process in advertising that you don't learn. You kind of have to like do a bunch of them. It takes forever to do the first bunch, and then you start getting really good at figuring out how to communicate all these points and doing this sort of marketing speak.
You figure out the language.
Figure out the
Which is
language.
such a specific
There's a lot of jargon in those decks. There's a whole lexicon of deck language, which we could do a whole panel on.
Oh yeah.
We just throw them on the board up here. But no, that's sort of how I got my start. It was just more traditional. Wanted to be a filmmaker and worked with a bunch of cool directors, and then basically like fell into advertising, and then also kind of fell in love with it because I think there's a lot of creativity in filmmaking now with branded content. What you're able to actually do for brands is far more different than the sort of traditional 30-second broadcast ad. Everything's changed in the last 10 years. So
Yeah. To that point, like you said, the traditional commercial spot, we've gone so much further beyond that from, brand storytelling perspective. What are the more common formats that you're starting to see, and what kind of storytelling are you creating from your perspective?
Well, it varies. I'd say we're living in the time of quantity deliverables, I call it. Like, in quality can still be very high, but no doubt we're in this time of like everybody wants to sort of create a lot of different deliverables to play to more niche audiences and market it in more like specialized ways. So it can be everything from like 6-second bumpers up to like 5-minute films, or even the last piece we did was 30 minutes of content. It was for antivirus software, it's like, but it was paid for by them, but they basically let us make a film about hacking and about this specific city in Romania where, cyber criminals had been coming from. FBI has been working on it. So it can be like very wide range of stuff. There's like a big debate, I think, in the last year about like what the right format and time length and like attention span, and now like I'll just to say it, this is the controversial thing to say, but like as a filmmaker, you want to make things cinematic. It's got to be anamorphic or widescreen, even though I think 4:3 has like been coming back in a big way in the last 6 months. Vertical video isn't that bad. I get in arguments with directors all the time, or purists. No. Hear me out.
I hate it.
This is the controversy. But really, like, it makes sense. Like, you review everything on your phone, and certain kinds of ads are even playing vertical in 6 seconds. It's like, is that filmmaking? I don't know. But if you're using it as pieces that tell a bigger story and how it's done, it can still be super creative. I guess that's my point. And so I feel like it's very wide variety of deliverables out there.
Yeah. I mean, recent campaigns I've worked on, we see numbers that it's 95 to 97% of our viewers are on mobile. So when you see numbers like that, it's hard, not to think about that format change. Folayo, what about you with formats? What kind of content are you creating with your client partners?
We are working on, we work sort of digitally first, and we are socially native. So we work with vertical, we work with standard, we also have a TV and long form. So for us, it's about figuring out what the story is and then shaping it, not shaping the story, but making sure that the version of the story that's told on the platform it's told on fits. Yeah. So you can't just create one thing and hope that it works everywhere. Yeah. So it's about, we want to tell we want to tell this one story with this one brand. On Facebook it looks this way. On YouTube it looks this way. If we're going to do something with Snapchat, it's certainly not going to be either one of those things. If we're going to put something on Instagram stories, it also has to have its own lane that respects the story that we're trying to tell, but also respects the platform that it lives on. I think for us, we've always been a bit platform agnostic, where we're really just about getting to the heart of the story and getting to the emotion of the story. Because if you can do that, it doesn't necessarily matter what platform you're looking at, and it creates new opportunity and new platforms and new ways of telling stories. I mean, like, I'm very curious what's going to happen with Quibi over the next year. That is high quality, high cinematic, vertical video in 7-minute increments, but they want you to tell a fully formed out story in that time, which is where I think indie filmmakers and new filmmakers have a real opportunity, because they haven't they haven't necessarily learned that you're not supposed to do that. So I think that, yeah, for us, I think we always try to just be as innovative and as present with our audience as possible, and then bring the brands into that. And that seems to work.
Great. So Danielle, you work with some of the most noteworthy music videos, video directors working today. When you are engaging with them on brand projects, what is their typical attitude towards brand projects? Is it seen as a necessary evil? Is it seen as an interesting challenge? Is it how they, pay the bills? I'm curious what the general thought is when people are at the top of their game.
It varies.
Yeah.
So like I said, it is something that bridges the gap between music videos and commercials. And like Max was saying, like, we got to pay our bills, and commercials are usually that way to do that.
Yeah.
So some of my directors are just like purists. They're just like, I don't want to make commercials, and they have other ways to make money, and bless them. They can figure that out.
That's great.
But for most directors, the reality is to do commercials. And why we love branded content is because you're allowed to, you can see some of the work we've done. Like we've done 3-minute short films, and that can then translate to features. Like the one spot we did for Chantel, which is like this 16-year-old, Olympic hopeful boxer girl. They're looking to hopefully turn that into a long format thing, like a 6-part series for that. And so just doing those little 3-minute spots, it just can lead to other things. So some directors love doing that. And also it's a money thing.
Yeah.
Back to the money.
Always is. So Folayo, how do you source the filmmakers that you produce content with, and how do you find collaborators?
We're kind of looking in a lot of different ways. So SoulPancake it's an interesting company because it serves as production company, influencer, and agency all in one. So we find filmmakers from submissions. Like, we are a company that takes unsolicited submissions. So, because you never know what voices you're going to find or uncover. We also have a network of filmmakers that we've worked with over the years. Find them the traditional way through agencies and managers. And then we have a team of people looking for talent. So if somebody sees something online or on TV or at a festival or whatever it might be, we're not afraid to just go find who made it, because if it's an interesting story and somebody has a great point of view and a great eye, then we want to be in business with those people. We want those people to be able to tell stories, and we have the freedom that there are a wide range of budgets that we can work within. I think sometimes newer filmmakers try to get the big projects, and that's a huge risk for a company. So I think sometimes when people come to us and they've got something that they worked on and they know how to work frankly kind of gritty, they know how to make something that looks expensive but doesn't cost that.
Yeah.
We're
always looking for scrappy.
Yeah.
Scrappy's the
Scrappy
word in my
is
agency. Yeah.
It's oh my God, look what you can do, and if we can trust you to do this, then let's keep talking about what more there is.
Totally. Well, speaking of budgets, I would love to talk about kind of the brass tacks of working with a brand. So what's the typical workflow when working with a brand or agency, and how are each of you sourcing and bidding for jobs? Max, we'll start with you.
Well, it kind of depends, right? So for brand work, the traditional model is that brands work with agencies look for directors are represented by production companies bid those jobs and get those jobs for the directors. Usually it's like a triple bid. There's 3 directors that go up and go against each other, and then the agency team will ultimately find it. A lot of that's changed. I work with a lot of directors, and I was an EP for those traditional production companies for about 12 years. So I've now gone freelance because I've seen a lot of different opportunity and more non-traditional ways of producing content. And a lot of the directors I work with are sort of non-exclusive and are working between production companies or even embracing being their own studio. And these are directors that have 10 plus years of experience. They've got brand relationships already, and I think it really depends. Like you go client direct on a job, or you work with like a network that's creating content for different brands, brand partnerships, or original content and developing projects. So like as an independent producer, I'm always trying to keep like multiple things going, you know, like you always have 3 projects that are sort of longer form focused or entertainment based with brand networks or with companies that are trying to develop something with a bigger budget and episodic. And then, you know, we do projects like a project with Kristin's agency where it's a director that I work with, and he has a small production company. He's also represented by a traditional production company, but he does sort of like one-off campaigns working directly with agencies and or smaller brands, where he can be involved creatively and help work with the agency, developing the idea, making it stronger. And I think like that's sort of the future for younger filmmakers especially, is being more involved in like the creative process. I think it's tough to justify money for that currently, but I think it's changing a lot. And so by that I mean, traditionally, creative directors, copywriters, art directors, they write up an idea, they sell it to the brand, then they go find the director for it. But I think is happening more and more, especially with younger directors, is they're so good at executing the idea. They know how they want to go make it. They don't necessarily know like how to say it, like what the call to action is, all those things that you kind of need to sell a message or a brand. So what's starting to happen, which is really exciting, is like brands are taking usually people that used to work at agencies in-house. They're developing kind of concepts that are strong to their brand values, and the best branded content out there, I think, lives up to this. So instead of like selling a product, they're selling a value or an idea of the product. They're integrating a true story or something that's more relatable to like us, general audience, people online, and they're doing it in a really focused way. So it's like, if it's selling a shoe, it's not selling the shoe, it's selling like what the shoe represents. It's selling an interesting story about a real person that, you know, people can relate to. It's much more engaging from like an audience standpoint. And bringing the directors into that process earlier, bringing producers into the process earlier, makes the work better. It makes it more efficient. I can bid a project for a director even if it's like, oh, this thing might exist. And it helps the agency or brand sell that thing quicker and go get it made. And it's, I said earlier, the kind of the quantity game. It sort of is, in that there's a lot more content being made than ever before at a smaller scale. So it's kind of being spread out. I feel like traditional TV commercial, 30 seconds used to be like maybe $1 million to go make it, and then a couple million media buy on top of that, and talent, everything else. It's basically like you've thrown that on its side, you've chopped it up, and now you've divvied up to all these different kind of categories, like niche focused content. And it's really cool. So people are like, oh, it's dead out there. It's really tough. Or like, you know, the traditional model's dying. But there's actually a larger quantity of jobs than ever before. We just have to, like, as producers, rethink how we're going and making it or going and selling it. It's exhausting to sell it. It's like the hardest time ever to like be bidding and representing directors that used to work really frequently on like big broadcast spots. You're like, it's not the way it is anymore. You got to go make 3 or 4 smaller budget spots instead of the one bigger budget thing. But I think that it's just interesting time. I think there's going to be like a shakeout of sorts. It's been happening.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Folayo?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
No, I'm just curious
To make
how
sure.
you, from your perspective, being at a really integrated kind of agency storytelling operation, how are you bidding on work? How are you working with brands? I know they're probably coming to you a good bit.
They do.
How does that process work?
I think it's a mix of both of those things. We figure out, so there's like the RFP process. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, where brands and agencies are literally going out to production companies and saying, we have this idea, we want you to make it. We want you to make it better, probably cheaper, or if not cheaper, then much better than the other people that we're going out to. And so in that regard, just like Max is saying, I mean, it's a process. It takes a lot of people doing a lot of work for a maybe job. And that's just the game. That's just what it is. We have a lot of brands that we've worked with repeatedly We have brands that come to us because they like our point of view. So I think that's something that's really important, like have one. Have a reason for people to choose you. So the brands that come to us, it's like they see the stuff that's on our channel. They know that they like that style. They want to be able to tell their brand story in that way. Those are the things that we really love. And then also, we'll have things that we just want to make. We have initiatives that we think are important, or that our audience will respond to, and then we go out outwardly and find brands to work with us on that. And so I think that's kind of the model that we work on. I think anybody that wants to work in branded content of any kind, and I think all of us probably do branded and other work as well. But for the branded side, it's like get used to the agencies. There's a lot of process, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of levels. It's never going to be as direct as you think it's going to be. And you might get an answer from the agency, and the agency might not have actually talked to the brand, and then after you're finished, you're not finished, because then the brand saw it. So that's...
And brands change their mind.
And brands change their mind. It's
A
like,
lot.
oh, something in the world happened, we can't do this anymore. And then it just goes that way. So it's good to have a variety of ways that you're working with brands. Otherwise, that last part might drive you a little nuts.
Yeah, sometimes it's very easy to villainize the brand because
Yeah.
they zigzag so much. But there can be an off quarter and they've moved money around. There can be a complete change in priority when it comes to a particular product, and that trickles down to all the way down to a creative brief. But
At the end
it
of
can
the
be
day,
bad.
they're just trying to protect what they have built as well. So a little grace on that, but it does get a little less, but.
And that actually is a good call out, is that oftentimes brands operate from a place of fear, which is incredibly tough in the creative process. And so if you're thinking about that mindset from the beginning, I think it's incredibly helpful. If not, it doesn't get you over the hurdles.
Yes.
But, so what about you? You probably have a pretty different perspective.
Yeah, same. Like I'm the receiving
You're
end of it.
receiving this. Yeah, I'd love to hear
So
your
I don't really know all the
perspective.
ins and outs of like how and why they came to wanting to do this project. But like 15 years ago, when I feel like I just started to work in branded content, like no one really knew what it was, but it was just like a new land. And I was going direct to client a lot in those days. And now I think agencies are really catching on that it's going to be a really successful way to get their brand out there in a very different way. I mean, because you think about like how we watch ads now. It's on it has to be like seamlessly. So you just catch one on Instagram stories or it's in between something you're watching.
Yeah.
So the broadcast spots are just not really as prevalent as they were before. So I think people come to us because if you look at just pure views online, like YouTube and everything else, it's music videos. I'm sorry, but that's what's getting the most views. So they want to like cash in on that, and what's a perfect way to do that is to kind of like just slip their brand in there like quietly. And, but you kind of feel like you're watching a music video or a short film. Like look, This Is America. Like I don't know how many views it is right now, but like we did a music video for One Republic Counting Stars, and it's like the 13th most watched video, which is crazy to me. But so they're seeing that, and like we want those eyeballs. So I think that's why they come to us specifically, is to help bridge that gap. And, it's like I said, we do mostly. It's just different than like SoulPancake and what you guys are doing. It's like mostly music branded content or short films, but there's always some sort of music component. Like even our beat spot, I can't remember who scored that, but it was like a Dublin boys choir singing Biggie, and so it's just like I think they won all these awards for best use of music. So even like something like that, there was some sort of music tie-in.
But that's so fantastic for your brand. That's so clear why they come to you for that music tie-in. So obviously your creative decision-making equation is greatly altered when a brand is involved, because there's audience considerations, there's messages that have to pull through, just really pure play marketing goals. How do you manage that? Folayo, I'll start with you. How do you manage the not having the creative suffer when you've got a ton of sometimes antithetical brand needs?
I think we're pretty clear at the beginning of it. So because we are a production company with our own audience, we don't make commercials, and we are very upfront about that at the beginning. We will make you a commercial, and you can take it and use it in whatever way you want. and that is one arm of our business. But if it's going to play on the SoulPancake channels, then it has to fit into what would be relevant for our audience, because similarly to music videos, people come to be entertained.
Yeah.
And so we are an entertainment first company, not, and a big logo it's not going to do for you what you think it's going to do.
Yeah.
So we have a kind of brilliant creative team that figures out, has lots of calls with the brands, and it's like, what is it that you're actually trying to get accomplished? What is it that you want to do? What is it, like, kind of digging to the actual goal of the campaign, and then creating a story around that can fit their brand into it in a way that, like you're saying, makes it feel like you're just watching something. I think, we had one kind of sort of ridiculous, sort of funny project that we did with a pet food company, where we had people date, like it was Date My Dog. It was like a dating show, but you went on a date with your suitor's dog. And a lot of the comments were so funny because they watched this whole thing that was like 10 or 11 minutes, and all these comments are like, was this a commercial? Did I actually just sit through and watch this as a commercial? And so I think that's where we try to get at the most, that's where we find the most success. Obviously there are some brands, and at the end of the day it is still their work, so we have to respect their wishes. But you can see the difference, where it's like, absolutely, if you feel very strongly about logo placement there or brand integration there, we're going to tell you what we think, what we advise, what we really, really advise. If you still want to go the other way, we will do this, but you'll see that it's not going to get the engagement that you want, because people want to feel something, and it's not that they're being sold something. Yeah. So I think that our creative team at SoulPancake does a really good job of expressing that to brands, and also creating a world that brings them in. That first client call, and even throughout the entire pitch process, that's when you're kind of, you have to bring them along. You have to bring the brand partner along so that there's a buy-in to what you're selling in terms of the story, because if they can get to that, fine cut and feel something, then they're less likely to try and incorporate more traditional things where it's like, but this is how we did it before. So it doesn't always work. A lot of the times for us, thankfully, it works. And I'm saying in terms of getting the brand to just do exactly what we want, that actually never happens. I don't know what I'm talking about. But sometimes there's that really nice blend that can happen. But I think that's just, it's par for the course that's going to be we'll figure it out just when you're working with brands, because it's your creative and their money. So,
yeah. It's an odd marriage.
Very much.
Max, what about you? And I'm also curious, should a director care about the brand creative brief? Most directors I work with just immediately forget it and just depend on you to kind of direct them.
Well, I think it's all an expectation game. Yeah. And so as a producer, I know Danielle deals with this, you try to understand where the brand's coming from with what they're trying to say and how they're trying to say it. You get a briefing maybe through a sales rep, or you basically have a kickoff call before you're greenlit on the job, you're pitching on the job. And maybe it's not the right thing to say, but it's the reality is I just stopped doing jobs if the expectations aren't in the right place. If a brand doesn't understand what they're trying to actually say, you're going to go into a project uphill battle the whole way trying to execute it. And it's always going to get watered down or meet somewhere in the middle. And unless it's a lot of money to let's just try it out, let's just see what happens, it's usually you're not spending enough money to just try it out. You need this thing to come out on a certain date, and you're trying to say a certain thing. So if your expectations are not in the right place, you're just gonna come out of this angry with us as the production company or with the director, and the vision's gonna get watered down. Everyone's gonna be frustrated in this process. So I've said no to jobs. Like I just will say, or you try really hard to explain, like build an expectation in the job so that they really understand what the value of the story you're trying to tell is and how it's integrated. At the end of the day, you don't always have control of how like a logo is being used or what a call to action is, or you can make something amazing and then it's like, oh, what the hell did that voiceover come from? Like, oh, that really ruined it. But it's something that I think I've also come to realize is like there's like a batting average with commercials, and I think if you can, so if you're a director and you make 5 commercials, and this is really like a bigger spiel on being a commercial director, but it's like you're not every time going to make the most great thing. It's not going to be perfect every time. If you're able to get like make five branded content pieces or brand pieces, and you're able to get like you should be able to get 1 or 2 great things out of it. 1 or 2 of them is not going to be so great, and one is going to be like okay, because there's so many factors that are out of your control as like the executor, the person making the thing, and when you've got like you're servicing a brand, you're there to ultimately sell something or make something. You don't always have that control. In addition to like you always can have bad light or the sound didn't work and interview didn't go as planned. I mean, there's the reality of making a film that like all of that can just not work out that day. The weather wasn't perfect. The time of day light that you had hoped for didn't work out. So that can also make the thing not as good as you wanted it to be. But I think like expectation and building expectation with a client is something that's extremely hard to do. But it really depends. If you're doing a more non-traditional way, you have to build trust, like with the producer on the other side, right? Like the agency producer, the client. And I will say that strategy is the most undervalued part of the creative process. So if like strategy is done correctly, meaning that like the brand has done their homework and they have a strategy, that means that they're already convinced of what's going to work before the brief is even written and before the production company even engages on the job. And it's kind of sad because I think strategy, if you read like Ogilvy on advertising, or these old school methodologies of going and creating an ad, strategy was always something that really baked into the creative process. And nowadays, things right now are in this place where it's disposable content, like snackable. We'll just make it and get it out there and it'll be great. It's like, no, you didn't really think that through. There's not really a strategy here. And those are the projects like try to stay away from, because if there isn't a good strategy at like the core of what they're trying to do, then you're only as good as the idea, the creative brief. So it's kind of cool because what your company does is you try to create strategy for the brand. Like, oh, well, you want to do this, let's sell it this way. And I don't really get to work on that part of the process always. It's usually comes to me already baked in, kind of ready to go. But you get the brief and you have the first call, you can usually tell, like, these guys, do you know what they're doing here? Or are they throwing this one together? And if they're throwing it together, sometimes you just pass. You say, oh, timing's not right, or the money's not there, or, I think the idea is not strong. Yeah. And you can say it. And sometimes they want to come back to you when they got more money. Yeah. The better idea, Yeah. So I think it's an important time to be kind of honest with clients too, when you feel like this is not going to work.
It's interesting, whenever content comes out that has a huge kind of what were they thinking kind of reaction, like it's so obvious what was wrong here. And I always tell people, you don't realize how many people are involved in pushing a concept, and when that concept is like already on the train tracks, getting it off the train tracks is nearly impossible from a money perspective, from an approvals perspective. To raise your hand when you're halfway through and say like, actually I think this is tonally off, like it's the mechanisms within agencies and production companies working together, it's really hard to untangle that knot. It's really interesting. So that upfront work is so important to avoiding that moment that is so hard. Danielle, for you, how do you as a producer get involved in making sure that the brief is being adhered to when you have a great creative mind kind of driving the production?
Well, from the beginning, we've been a little like lucky with some of the stuff we've been shooting, because the brands like don't even want their brand in it. Yeah. Like that Nike spot we did with Chantel, like you only know it was for Nike just because there's like a just do it at the end. Yeah. They just want to tell stories and get it out there and just post it on their sites. And the Chance the Rapper Jordan spot we did was essentially just like a music video. Yeah,
totally.
So like on those, it is the director participation and like knowingness of like brand expectation. It all comes in the bidding process, so we're all pretty clear on what we're supposed to do. But you know, like on a traditional broadcast spot, you're going to have 30 people in Video Village. There's going to be a lot of feedback on the type of work we're doing. There's like a person in Video Village. So I feel like we have a little bit more freedom. So it's not. I mean, filmmakers love it, so there's not a lot of that like brand pressure on a lot of stuff that we're doing.
So the lesson here is get Nike as your client.
Yeah.
That's all you gotta do and you'll be fine.
But there are a lot of people out there, especially like sports and like the beats we work with all the time.
Yeah.
Like,
Nike and Apple as your client.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's certain brands that get it, are outliers that understand it, you know. Not,
What are the brands that get it? I'd love to
Those
know.
two definitely
yeah,
get it.
God, I can't. We've worked with so many people that they just been kind of gave us the freedom just to make something dope, and like because that's the stuff that people are going to watch.
Exactly. Why put so much money into it? That always is so hard. We have to say point blank to our clients, if you're investing this much money, don't you want
Our
somebody
viewers
to
are
enjoy it?
sophisticated now too.
Yeah.
You know, like they know when they have a brand shoved. I mean, even like we came up like our early branded content was shoving products in music videos, which is so obvious. It's like here's Lady Gaga with like a vape or whatever, you know. And so you know they know when they're being shoved brands. So that's why they say like we don't even want a brand in there. And those are like the best kind of projects.
Yeah. This project Max referenced earlier that we worked on with a client. They really wanted a lot of brand in it, and so we got into this middle ground where we're like, let's make 2 versions of this video, basically. Let's split it in 2, which was actually Max's idea, into 2, and one was like super branded, one wasn't. And the unbranded one, I haven't even told you this, outperformed the other one 11x. Like, it was just like, there you go. Like, the 11x is so crazy, but it was so easy to like make that argument. But it's hard. It's really hard for brands to like relinquish. So I would love to hear your thoughts on what are the key elements to great branded content. I mean, obviously a cool factor and something people want to watch, but is there anything else that aspiring branded content filmmakers should be thinking about?
For me, it's music. Like that's what drives so much of what we do, even if it's just not even a famous artist, it's just the score. And it just, because most of the branded content we do is 3 minutes to like 4-minute songs, so you want to engage them and like you're watching a little short film, and that's like the best thing for people who want to do a feature one day. Like it's a good little calling card, it's practice. So that's what works for me.
I mean, I think that for us or with our team, we just think about content, period. Yes, we work with brands, yes, we make branded content, but the best thing for content is to get people to feel something. That's kind of our bread and butter, is to find the emotional story and find the thing that connects. Because that's what's going to connect even when there's a brand involved, because if you're missing the entertainment factor too, we're also, like I said, entertainment first. So entertainment and emotion is how we operate. From a personal standpoint, I totally agree, music. Like I think music has this visceral ability to just like touch and move people in a way that very few other things do. So if you have the good fortune to work with brands and music, that's a huge win. But find the story, find the emotion, make sure you feel something. If you don't feel something, nobody else is going to feel something. And then if you add a brand on top of the not feeling something, it's just, I mean, there's almost no point.
Yeah, I think the same stuff, but story has to have a hook, right? Like short form branded content is most effective when the story has like I gotcha, or just a moment of like, oh, that was unexpected. I think if you have that as a foundation as to a brief that you get or that you create, then music, also technique. Like a lot of directors I work with, it's like, oh, we're just gonna find one camera trick, like one thing we can do to like unveil this story in an interesting way, much like a way a music track can, or even a talent can, if you have the right casting process to find like the right character or person to like convey the story. So it's all those like filmmaking things, music, who's in it, how you go shoot it and edit it, a lot of stuff is done in the edit now too. Like you see some amazing work that's like just all in the edit. I love the guava. I don't think we're talking about. It's like in the edit, that editorial on that is like amazing. It really like helps drive the scene. You know, the story is good, but it's really the execution that's like makes that thing shine. So, yeah, you have to have a good idea, but find the right techniques. I think like that makes it go next level usually.
So what are your recommendations? What's your advice for someone who maybe is in the position you were in, 12 years ago, trying to figure out how to get into branded content?
Just go make stuff like that. Okay, so like a lot of young filmmakers or like interns at production companies that I worked for, they're like, oh, do I go make a spec ad, or like, what do I do? And like, no, go find like a no-name brand and go just make something for them and try to find a story there with that brand. Like, it sounds silly, but like, take something that you really care about, that you actually like people like coffee, you like coffee, great. Find a cool coffee shop, go find a story that has to do with where they get their coffee and how they do it, and go make like a piece of branded content. Like, it's not difficult. You don't need a lot of money to go make something or find an interesting story hook. I have like a PA that worked for me, and I was talking with him about this idea a couple of years ago, and he ended up making and selling like a whole show about pizza ovens. But like, you can do that. Like, and he was in New York, so it's like, wow, you got all these killer pizza places here. People love pizza. Food is an easy clickbaity thing, and like, you don't know what you want to do, but like, go find a story about some coal oven pizza character, and he did, and then he ended up like getting money to go make more stuff, so it's like you can kind of go see real stories everywhere. Like, we're all like pretty heavy consumers right now, this day and age, if you live in this city or that one, so find the thing that you like to go buy and spend your time talking about with your friends, and then find the story, go like figure it out. I think like the easiest kind of branded content to just jump into is the whole like real people, semi-documentary, real life. Like, that doesn't take a lot of money. It just takes like some skills of talking to people, getting an interesting story sort of laid out on paper, and then going after it. The other approach, which like is more my background, is like just make Danielle, just go make music videos. They're always fun. There's always cool bands and artists looking to make art. You can get yourself in trouble easier, I think, making music videos too, because it usually requires like stealing shots and doing more sketchy stuff, and like, you gotta be.
Doomsday was terrifying.
Yeah,
I'm
you
like,
gotta be safe. Yeah, like shooting out of cars is not safe, but like it's how you make your first music video. Like, don't do it.
But also do it.
But figure it out. Yeah, I mean, just don't shoot it in like LA, because it's like it's just too difficult here. To go find a cool location out of town and shoot in the desert or something. But yeah, I'd say just go out there and make it. You don't really need a big budget to like go get started on this stuff.
I agree. Make it. I would say also do your homework. If you're looking to work with a company, know what they make, know what they like, and don't assume that your brilliance is enough. Then I think that, like I said earlier, having a point of view, understanding what types of things you want to make, or the type of director, producer, whatever that you are, and really being clear about that. Do the work. I can't stress that enough. Like, go out, make something, do the work. Don't assume that anybody owes you anything, because nobody owes you anything. I think that sometimes with up-and-coming filmmakers, there's that passion, which is awesome. But as I think we've all kind of subtly said here, it's like we also are all trying to make a living. So your passion is wonderful. But your passion can't necessarily pay the bills of us or the staff or whoever it is. So get out there, do the best of your work, be better at it than the other people, and not just in your mind, but like actually go out and like, be better at it, own your craft, like figure out the next wave. If you're paying attention to these sort of little subtleties that are happening in the industry, you could probably carve a niche out for yourself where other people haven't done it yet. Like I mentioned, and you mentioned vertical video. Maybe be the best vertical producer, director that there is. Go out there, figure out how you frame a shot beautifully, when it looks like this. You know, so people are still trying to figure it out. There are all of the beautiful part about the industry as it is right now is that it's changing on a minute to minute basis, which means every minute there's a new opportunity to find your foot. So you don't need to like try to work your way or like bulldoze your way into somebody else's lane, create your own, but it does require a lot of work to do it, and there's no shortcut for that.
Hallelujah to the work. So I, since I'm in music video, I work with a lot of really young filmmakers, like either still in college or straight, like I started working with Hero when he was still at USC. So it's like a real like pet peeve of mine. And I also teach at USC, and like a lot of my students, when they come out, they're like, "Well, I have arrived. I'm here." It's like, okay, now you have to do the work. And like, I don't know if you guys say this, but like I always had to tell my directors, like, you're only as relevant as what you've made in the last 6 months. Like even if you have a little bit of a dry spot, like in your career, like just go out and make something. I have a director that just shoots on his iPhone and shoots the most incredible stuff. Like just continually making content. Specifically for music video. Again, like, don't do a spec spot. Like, there's so many bands out there that are dying to make a music video. So if you did have the luxury of going to film school, make it there so you have access to all their fun tools. And if you don't, like, shoot it on your iPhone because, again, you can make beautiful looking things on that. The one thing is like, just figure out, I mean, it is hard to do early on in your career, but, like, what is your style? Because I have had so many directors send me their reel, and it's shot for shot videos we've already done, or, like, Hero's reel. And I'm like, I don't want another like Hero after taxes, you know what I mean? Like I want like someone who has their own voice. So I think that's what I look for the most.
So
I mean, you could shoot it on a 5D. I know it's like, oh God, but like, I just, if the concept's there, then that's like exciting to me. And I've signed people off of like one video, but I can just see in their reel, like, oh, they got it. Like there's something there.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I would also add, just from the agency perspective, agencies are always looking for new, now, next. Like what's happening? So like right now it's like TikTok. Like what's TikTok? And what are the kids doing? And what are they doing on it? And how do like that? There's always that school of fish like moment for platforms. And so I think if you want to work specifically in branded content, paying attention to what platforms are emerging or new ways of expression, because every agency is having a brainstorm and like bringing in 12-year-olds, explain it to us. And so if you are able to think creatively within those new formats and have something and have a point of view within that format, that puts you to the front of the line, because it's like, did you see this guy is doing something crazy? Every day our creative directors are just, they follow 14,000 people on Instagram. Like it's a compulsion, and that's where they're finding talent. They're just like on Instagram following people. And then when we've got a brief, like they'll literally go into their Instagrams and be like, this person, this person, this person, this person. So definitely don't underestimate, thinking about things through the lens of format and creating content and then putting it up on your socials, because there are CDs out there just constantly looking for that. And you might get discovered that way, who knows? Well, now we have time for some questions. If anybody has a question, we'll go ahead and start. We'll start with this gentleman in the jacket.
Sure. And I guess this could be for all of you, or if someone feels particularly strongly, but how do you like to test out new collaborations with someone you haven't worked with before? In terms of
like a director or a brand, or?
Yeah, director.
It's a good question.
Yeah, I know,
Because like as an
question,
agency
like-
person, I go back to the same well. When I trust somebody, I'm locked into them.
Exactly. I mean, that's why we do so much beats work, because they just know that they can call us and I'll be in Madrid 5 days later shooting someone. The director, I mean, again, it's usually like the lowest budget, like the least risk involved. Because I do like Hero, perfect example. Like he was still at USC. He was just kind of underneath like another director that was at USC, and I was like, hey kid, you want to try out this $3,000 block party video? Like, there's no risk involved with that. Like if they fuck up, whatever, it's $3,000 to the label. And he ended up making a video about like singing vaginas, and I was like, okay, you were really dark in there. So like it just like, again, like low risk, and then and then also if they do fuck it up a lot, you're like, oh cool, okay, how can we grow from this, and kind of just learnable moments, like it's teachable moments.
I find new talent through introductions. I mean, it's kind of a transfer of trust. You know, it's either I have a bedrock of trust in a creative, or I'm introduced to somebody and then it's from somebody I trust and they transfer that over. So I think it's just working on your network is really important, because that's how I find people. It's through
Yeah,
introductions.
most of my new directors now it's so hard for me to go through all like the amount of like unsolicited emails I
Yeah,
get.
it's really hard.
If I get an email from someone I know, like Drea, for example, she'd be like, here, check out this filmmaker. Like, at least it's a name I know in my inbox, and I'll feel like obligated to watch. And so yeah, that sign of approval.
So for the company's standpoint, for us, we have literally, it's pitch@soulpancake.com. It's an email, it is checked. Not everybody gets an email back right away. So it's, for us, when we're looking at how we collaborate with new directors, we're looking at people who have fully formed out ideas. We're looking for people who aren't looking for us to do their work to make their dream come true. I don't know if you're noticing a theme with what I'm saying. So somebody who's kind of done the work themselves and is looking and ready for a next step, and has a very, like you said, a unique point of view, something we haven't seen before. Most often pitch is usually just an email that we don't like move forward with. So thinking about something new. And I know that's like maybe not that helpful an answer, like be awesome, but that's the answer.
Awesome. Other questions?
What are like the pros and cons that you found with working with, say, like an established brand versus like an emerging brand? Like, and specifically when talking about emerging brands, I'm looking at like tech companies with like VC money.
I've done a lot of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've worked with a company up in San Francisco for 6 months, and that's like all they did. That was their whole business model, was being the go-to for tech-based information and entertainment content. And it was a super interesting business model. This was only a couple of years ago, and I was basically kind of consulting and helping them put together like production process and understanding it. And I saw a lot of value in like what that business has and is. I think it kind of comes back to the thing we talked about earlier. The emerging brands or digital first brands, right, are really stuck on like the strategy, like what's the thing that we're really trying to say about our brand, and they try to jam too many messages into one piece of content. They're trying to say like everything they can do in one video, and it's, unless you're doing like a internal manifest video for VC purposes, it's really hard to make something consumer facing that's like tells you 3 selling points of a product or an idea. You really only have time for one, and that's like by far the hardest thing about those kinds of brands, is like you got to pick the one thing you want to drive people to your site or to your brand or to whatever the call to action to take you, and then learn more. Whereas the established brands, like the pro, of course, with the established brands is that they have more money. They have a bigger idea and vision of who they are, what they are. The con, and I've run into this with even some brands that we talk about being great to work with, is like, oh, you have too much money, or you have so much money that you can just like try stuff out, and it's annoying on the execution side sometimes to be like, okay, great, how long are we going to talk about the extension cord in the background of the shot? Because does that even matter for what we're trying to say, you know? Or that the legacy of a brand is so established that it can't be reinvented. You know, like, and that's like kind of a historic, like there's a lot of case studies of that. Like big brands like Levi's did it really successfully about 10 years ago, you know, the whole Go Forth thing. I read that pitch book, and the White and Kenny put together, actually made a copy of it and had it on my desk for years, because it was so incredible how they like convinced a brand that was over 100 years old to reinvent themselves. And they did successfully do that. And there's not that many brands that have like been around for 100 years, totally reinvented themselves and did it through branded content. There's like literally like less than 20 probably examples, like across all American brands. So those are like the pros and cons that I see. But the tech companies are easy to approach. Yeah. So like, and there's the sandwich video model. Sandwich video is this company this guy started. I don't know if you guys are anyways familiar, but you know, it's talk to camera kind of guy, nerdy guy, talk to camera, explain how a product works. But like, they did that for like 100 brands, and a couple of them were like Nest cameras. They did it for a couple of brands that really took off, and then they were really smart. They got a little bit of stock in brands. They'd like, oh, we'll do it for no money, but just give us like 1% of your company if it takes off or whatever. It's like, well, that worked out pretty well. I think there's like 150 people working for that company now. So that's like that's just like a niche focused thing. And that company in San Francisco I work for is the same thing. Like, we're just going to concentrate on emerging tech as like a thing. Instead of saying, oh, we do everything, we're 360 and we can make all different kinds of branded content. I think there's something to be said right now for like just focusing on one thing that you want to do really well and doing that. As a filmmaker, that's definitely the right move. If you diversify too much as a director, I actually think that it might hurt you more than it helps you right now. As a producer, it's the opposite. Like, I need to constantly be working on different things because it's hard to know what's going to stick. I also like to diversify. Just personally, I get bored if I'm doing the same thing over and over again. But that's just me.
I have a lot of startup clients in Silicon Valley, and what's interesting is even when they've got a good amount of VC money, marketing tends to be later in the list of what they're staffing up. You know, they're really focused on product, they're really focused on, you know, growth hacking, things like that. And so it's usually this kind of moment where the CEO and the C-suite kind of is like, okay, we've got to we need to do a video. Like, we need to do a video is like the story of Silicon Valley right now. And sandwich video really was so smart, and you hear a lot of like, I want that. You know, it's always based on another video what they want. So what's interesting is it's kind of a gold rush up there. There's a ton of people working up there, but there's a lot of work. It's just chaotic because it's a lot of people who aren't really sure about storytelling, things like that. But I would suggest, you know, I joke that Crunchbase is the new IMDb. Like, Crunchbase is the IMDb of startups. So it's their funding amounts, you know, stuff like that. So you can keep up with companies and what they're doing, who's funding them on Crunchbase. If you want to start, because I think that market up there, you know, there's really no end in sight. It's just a gluttony of money and opportunity, but to kind of find out where you want to go is tough, but I'd suggest keeping an eye on it. Did you have a question? In the pink shirt? I feel like you had a question earlier. Yeah.
Have you guys been able, or any of the brands been able to track sales to specific campaigns, or is it more about building a community around the content, overall longer-term strategy?
Definitely my world. Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, sure.
That's not my world. That's Kristin. I'll have to
Yeah,
answer
I'm
that.
like, curious.
It depends on the brand and it depends on the campaign. You know, throwing in some acronyms because can't not.
Oh, thank you.
The KPIs, the performance indicators. If direct results or if they have a campaign where it's a direct response campaign, then you're looking to figure out how you can incorporate that call to action into the messaging, and there's like click the link below, that kind of thing. But sometimes it is just about awareness, some of about or social listening, or they want positive brand affinity, so it's about doing, you know, testing insights before and after to see if the sentiment is higher after than it was before. It really, as prevalent as this is in content right now, there's still so many ways of figuring out what is it from a goals perspective that is the most effective. And not to say that, like, you know, everybody, well, hopefully, most people come in with a goal in mind, but even at the end of that, it's evaluating if that's even the right goal. So maybe you didn't get as many link clicks as you wanted, but there's a lot more searches happening all of a sudden for your brand. So maybe the link clicks weren't that important. It's hard, especially unless you're like tracking people super frequently, like where do they go on the internet? It's hard to see the bouncing ball go from one to the other. And as the marketer, I think it's always sort of funny just because I think that's like the biggest challenge in marketing. Everybody wants to see like, what was the direct line between that thing you did and our sales?
What's the KPI that you're usually looking for campaigns?
A lot of time for us, they're looking for engagement. They are looking for people, like we'll go through, we have a whole system where we're going through and we're looking at comments and things like that if we're doing something on our channel where we can actually see in real time what people are saying, not just about the content, but about the brand. So if it's like, I don't know, I love T-Mobile for Business. I didn't know they were doing this stuff for women. How wonderful.
Take a screenshot
You
of that.
know,
put it in the deck.
and you do. Yeah, put it in the deck.
Put
It's
it in
like,
the
look at this, look at that. You know, we track hashtags.
It was me. I remember.
Actually, it was me. Just kidding. It wasn't me. But so we have unique hashtags for the campaign, and we're tracking to see who was using this hashtag before the campaign and who was using it afterwards. And if we can say that that increased by, 100% increase, or you're seeing a brand lift on certain things. We did a campaign with Sprint about a year ago for their 1 million project, and we were able to see how their hashtag was performing pre-campaign and post-campaign, and seeing all the surge. The surge, in the social conversation around the brand, and not just about the phones, but about the specific content that we were doing. So those are the types of campaigns, and I think because we have an audience built in, it's going to be different than you might have probably with anybody else on here, because we can actually just look directly at what's happening with the audience that's watching it. But it really does depend on the brand. When we do white label, like our KPI, like our white label, so just production that we make it and deliver it, that's our goal. We make it, send it off into the world, and then they can figure out what their goals are with it at that point. And hopefully they came into the conversation knowing what they were going to do with it.
Yeah. I mean, it's exactly that. I've had campaigns that we, the one we worked on with Max, we had 4 KPIs, which is tough. So it was video views, it was engagement, hashtag usage, and then media coverage of the campaign, which is very big right now. The majority of my clients, there's less and less journalists out there. It's harder and harder to get media attention, what we call earned media, to be covered in the media. And so a lot of our clients are coming to us and they're saying, we want to make content that drives earned media. That's a huge goal right now. And so getting your campaign on broadcast news or being shared, by CNBC or something like that's a big thing, and that's becoming a KPI for us. But also, we will track the hell out of a campaign. I've got a campaign live right now where we're focusing on one age group, and we want them to experience this product. And so it's trial downloads, like how do they download to have a free trial? So it can be really varied. We have time for one more question. Let's see, I haven't had a lady yet.
So building on what you were just talking about, so you were talking about how you look at the effectiveness once the campaign is out in the marketplace. Can you talk a little bit about if you use and how you use market research in the creative process, like before you launch the campaign?
It's a huge part of ours, to what Max was saying, strategy being an incredible part of the creative process and often missing. You have to have market research to inform that strategy. So you've got to know, what demos are you looking at that you want to talk to, and then what is their typical behavior, what are their wants and needs. One exercise that we do with all of our campaigns is called Think, Feel, Do. So like we'll take all the market research and what we want to achieve, and then we just sit down and we actually map out, like we look at our audience and we say, when they experience our campaign, what do we want them to think, what do we want them to feel, and then what do we want them to do? And we're really kind of focused on like defining that before we go into a campaign, but it always starts with market research, which is typically provided to us by our clients because it's very expensive. There's typically huge arms of companies that focus exclusively on that on an ongoing basis. So we need to take in as much as we can. I think we might be at time, but if there are questions, I'm sure if you guys don't mind, we'll be outside if anybody wants to follow up. But thank you guys all for hanging out with us. Have a great rest of your time.